Good morning, friends. This is Ved Prakash Singh from IIT Consultancy. Today we are going to discuss standard operating procedure for isolated hazardous chemical storage areas, which has been devised by Gujarat Pollution Control Board. If you see here, there is a circular which has been issued by the Gujarat Pollution Control Board. The subject is standard operating procedure for isolated storage areas for hazardous chemical storing. If you see, there are various reference points has been considered by GPCB, committee to devise this as a standard operating procedure. Number one, office order bearing GPCB CTE KH 1203 ID 80805/602119 dated 28th September 2021, and second reference was used by the committee integrated guidance framework of chemical safety in respect of the isolated storage and industries covered under MSIHC rule. Considering the requirements and industry's expectation, GPCB has felt an urgent need to devise a strategy to make a SOP. Therefore, after some time, the GPCB has constituted an expert committee comprising from various subject matter experts from various fields. With respect to the office order on 28 September 2021, the expert committee has done a detailed discussion, brainstorming, and devised a standard operating procedure for isolated storage areas for hazardous chemical, toxic and non-toxic both. When we are saying toxic and non-toxic, that means there are some chemicals which may not be toxic but flammable, combustible, and highly explosive. So these all chemicals have been considered while devising the SOP for these chemicals. This SOP has got a checklist and points to be considered while issuing the permission by the board, specifically where such storage are not in the jurisdiction of other various authorities as mentioned in Schedule 5 of Manufacturing, Storage and Import of Hazardous Chemical Rule 1999. Like Chief Inspector of Factory, now it is a DISH, Chief Inspector of Dock Safety and Chief Inspector of Mines appointed by Chief Controller of Explosive. This SOP is strictly going to be used by board internally, and to make a decision tool to have informed decision across the company in all the industries across the Gujarat. So I would say that based on my experience, this is very good initiative taken by the Gujarat Pollution Control Board to make a standard SOP so that there is no confusion and there is no bias, and it is stand alone clear instruction for all official, and this has been issued by Sri DM Thakur Saab on 30th June 2020. So this is very nice initiative, sir. Thank you very much for this nice initiative by you and your team. A copy of this SOP has been circulated to various bodies. You can see the various points here. I'm not going to read this for you. If you wish, you can pause the video and go through all the CC locations. And I am going to put the link of this entire circular in the end of the description of the IITC channel tube, from where you can feel free to download if you wish. As you mentioned that this copy has been circulated to various locations. There are 7 to 8 people where this copy has been circulated, so that there is a uniform distribution for knowledge, awareness, placement, publishing can be done for this SOP. Now let us discuss very quickly regarding the requirements, points and condition which has been narrated by the expert committee in the standard operating procedure for isolated storage area of hazardous chemical. We will see the very now the first purpose you see that standard operating procedures is prepared to give a guiding tool requirements to give the permission on receipt of the application from the various parties uh, in for isolated storage of hazardous chemical, specifically where such storage areas are not in the jurisdiction of various authorities. That means other authorities like DISH, like CCOE, like Chief Inspector of Dog, where they are not able to intervene or they are not able to give the permission, which is mentioned in Schedule 5 of MSIHC Rule 1989. In this case only, this checklist is going to be used, this SOP is going to be used. Say for example, in some cases, DISH, CCOE or other authorities has got some authority to give the permission for some storage areas. But in this case, isolated storage area for hazardous chemical, where they are not able to give any permission. In this case, Gujarat Pollution Control Board authorities has got some, some standard operating procedure to give the approval for consent to establish and consent to operate for the isolated areas for storage of hazardous chemicals. The standard operating procedure has sort of a checklist and point to be considered while giving or issuing the permission by the board. And the overall purpose of this SOP is to identify all the risks associated while handling and storage of the chemicals, so that these risks are accordingly managed to minimize the risk for accident prevention or damage of the human life, environment and property. If you see the scope of this circular and the scope of this SOP, the scope of SOP is limited only as a decision making tool in the application received by the board, such as consent to establish and consent to operate for this kind of isolated storage areas, as we discussed previously, and to create an informative decision in process of such application. This SOP is supplement to the various guidelines issued by CPCB New Delhi. Now let us see the various requirements for siting for isolated storage areas for hazardous chemical. Now number one is storage facilities located in urban area. Urban area and rural area has got different criteria. Let us go one by one. If the storage facility is located in the urban area like municipality, urban development authority, where development is planned and prepared, but unit must be in the industrial zone only. When we are saying that the unit of hazardous chemical storage area should be in industrial zone only, in no case isolated storage area shall be permitted in the residential area. In no circumstances, no condition, isolated storage areas for hazardous chemical should be allowed in the residential area. Occupier or the project proponent have to obtain the permission from local authority while making the consent to establish. This is very important point. Let's say municipality or DTA or development authority has a proposal. So they have to obtain the permission from local authority for making the consent to establish. And occupier or project proponent shall have to obtain the fire NOC before applying for the consent to establish. This is very important point for siting the storage areas in the urban area. So number two, storage facilities located in other than urban area. So that means it may be in the rural area or maybe in away from the urban area. So in this case, the very important point you see, if the storage facility is located in other than the urban area, the land must be converted into NA, non-agriculture. And the NA order should have mentioned that the land parcel is going to be used only for storage of hazardous chemical. This is very important criteria for giving the permission. That means the project proponent must get the land NA, and in that order it must be mentioned that this land parcel is going to be used for only storage of isolated hazardous chemical. Now guys, if you see, the storage facilities should comply the following setting criteria. This is very important point for any project proponent who is going to apply for consent to establish or consent to operate. They must go through all these points. These points are very clear, short and simple. This will make your job easier if you follow this guideline before applying. So you can get the approval very quickly from the Gujarat Pollution Control Board. Let us go through very quickly. The unit must be minimum 500 meters away from the residential area, schools and college. Number two, this should be minimum 500 meters away from the historic buildings, religious process, forest boundary and coastline. Number C, the unit should be in accordance with the control line of National Highway Authority, Express Highway Authority, state highways, district major roadways as per the notification of concerned authority. So this is very important because this hazardous chemical storage area must follow the guideline as per the national highway authorities and various authorities for control of line. The unit should be in accordance with control line of railway track also. There are guidelines. Railway says that this kind of chemical storage area must have some minimum distance. The unit should be at least 500 meters away from the water source like river, nala, canal, lake and pond and etc. Such industry according to the use of non-agricultural land and all around the industry should be maximum green belt of 5 meters in the premises should be there. In the premises there should be 5 meters, 5 meters from the periphery should be green belt. So my understanding is if any project proponent or any industry who are going to take the consent to establish and consent to operate permission from the authority, they must go through line by line and must ensure that these conditions are followed. If you are not followed, then probably there will be delayed permission and approval from the respective authority. So now in this section there are special criteria. Let us go through very quickly because I don't want to take much time of yours. No person shall store the hazardous chemical in the storage area without obtaining the fire NOC from the competent authority. Number B, for storage of hazardous chemical in the isolated area, permission shall have to be obtained from the local authority. Number C, the electrical supplier authority before supplying the power to this kind of storage area, they have to ascertain that isolated storage area for the storage of hazardous chemical have obtained permission as indicated in A and B. Number D, storage of hazardous chemicals should not be permitted in the residential area. In no condition, storage of hazardous chemical are to be permitted in the residential area. This we have also seen before. In the isolated storage area where the hazardous chemicals are stored should not be permitted for any type of manufacturing. That means when you are going to obtain the permission from the consent to establish and consent to operate from the authority, you should not and no manufacturing should be done in that area. When PP project proponent is going for application of the consent to establish, they should submit the safety audit report, risk assessment, HAZOP report and other process hazard analysis report to the authority. Unit should or must submit the on-site emergency plan to the board along with the consent to operate application. And unit must upgrade and update on-site emergency plan on time to time on required basis. These are the very essential point what we must consider when we are applying for consent to establish or consent to operate. The unit shall conduct safety and fire audit once in a year. through the reputed institute or through an expert not associated with such isolated storage area and shall submit the report to the board. This is compulsory. The CPCB guideline on isolated storage area published in December 2021 with respect and with a reference to Honorable NGT matter 60 by 2021 shall be invariably complied. You cannot take any exemption on that. Every unit storing the hazardous substances chemical mentioned in column 2 of the table is equal to or in excess of the threshold quantity specified in column 3 of the said table of the Public Liability Insurance Act and Rule 1991 shall take out insurance policy under provision of Public Liability Insurance 1991 and submit to the GPCB before getting the consent to operate permission. So guys, there is a checklist for minimum requirement or minimal requirement which has to be followed and used by all the operator who are going to operate isolated storage for hazardous chemical. The minimum requisite infrastructure facilities and operation control is mentioned in the Annexure 1. The Annexure 1 is there in the end of the presentation. I am not going to read line by line on that. I would encourage you to go through line by line to understand. If you need my help, I am definitely available for that case. So guys, there are some special conditions are mentioned in the SOP. And this is point wise point are given over here. This must be respected when any project proponent is going to apply for consent to establish or consent to operate. So probably it is not worth reading all the points one by one. I would encourage you to go through line by line, point wise point, and it is self-explanatory. This slide is again the part of the special condition, and this is very easy to understand, and probably it is not a good idea to read line by line. If you wish, you can go through that, and if there is any concern, so please, I would encourage you to put in your comment section so that I can come up with a exhaustive program on this on circular in a lengthy way, explaining each and every bullet points so that it is easy for you to understand. So guys, the beauty of this SOP is this SOP has covered each and everything for isolated storage areas, use, construct, maintain, and use has been clearly mentioned it. If you are going to follow, you means any project proponent is going to follow each and every point, that means there is less possibility of accident. You are going to remove or you are going to terminate all the hazards in place. So what will happen? The possibility of an accident will go down. So this is the guideline for a storage shed. This says that how the storage shed has to be built. Let us go through very quickly. Flammable, ignitable, reactive and incompatible waste shall be stored separately and never be stored in the same storage shed. Fantastic point. Because you are going to remove the hazard. If you are going to remove the hazard, accident will never arise. Storage area may consist of different sheds for storing different kind of hazardous waste, chemical, and this shed should be provided with suitable openings. So that means it is also recommending if you have different kind of waste, you can have different shed for storing of the different hazardous chemical. Storage area should be designed to witness or withstand the load of material stocked and any damage for the material spillage. Very nice point. Storage area should be provided with flame-proof electrical fittings. It should be strictly adhered to because there are few chemicals which can create a flammable mixture, explosive vapor cloud, which can get ignite or can get explode in case of getting a spark. There are other bullet points are given in this slide, and this is very easy to understand. I will not go through line by line to save your time. I would encourage you to make a list, make a checklist when you are going to apply for consent to establish or consent to operate to make your job easier so that authority can give the permission without delay, without making further query. This is again the balance points which has to be considered as a special condition for isolated storage of hazardous chemicals. These are the guidelines for storage in the drum, because there are a few chemicals which are being stored in the drums, in the ISO, ISO's container, in the tonners. So there are various conditions which has been highlighted in the SOP. It is very easy to understand and it is good for us to follow before applying the consent to establish or during operation. Other important guidelines has been clearly mentioned, that is smoking, ventilation, and maintenance, access control. Everything is mentioned over here, which has to be followed during operation, and this has to be followed for consent to establish and consent to operate. These are the balance points which has been mentioned in the SOP, and like mock drill, training, skilled and competent staff, and other storage areas. Note, this SOP is for internal purpose of the board to have uniformity in the decision making of application received for isolated storage, and shall not have any overriding effect on any circular or guideline issued by CPCB, MOEF, and CC. This is the only guideline. Guys, as I mentioned that there is an extra one. This says about how should be your layout, what is the compatibility, MSDS use and placement, and various PPE, various firefighting equipment, and accessibility of this storage chemical, display and visual management has to be done by the project proponent. Spill management, you have to have a spill control management system, you have to have spill kits. Electrification, you have to have the electrification as per the zone 0, zone 1, zone 2. Illumination and vibration, proper illumination should be there and proper ventilation should be there so that there is no chance of accumulation of vapor cloud. Yes, housekeeping is a very important part. This has to be taken care during operation. Training and records. The people should be trained and skilled. Order control management has to be there. Probably you can have order control sensor. Emergency response plan has to be there. People has to be trained. This has to be practiced on regular basis, on the mock drill basis. Fire strike box has to be there in adequate numbers and has to be placed in the different locations. Stacking of material. There are various requirements of stacking of material because sometimes you are stacking one above another. So we have to follow the guideline as per the mentioned requirements. Handling tools and tackles, because these are the hazardous chemicals. Sometimes this can create a spark, so you have to handle your ladder, portable ladder, ELCV, power flips, and other things as per requirement. Resource. CPCB guideline for storage of hazardous waste chemical December 2021 has been used for devising this checklist and annexure. Guide with this, I have run through very quickly just to give more information in less time. I would request you to please subscribe the channel so that you can get a regular input and regular update from our channel, and we are going to ensure that you will get all the updates regarding legal requirement, regarding any compliances requirement on time published by various authorities on their schedule basis. So it's my humble request to please subscribe this channel, and if possible you can circulate to your other fellow colleagues, fellow members, so that they can also have the updated information in this one. So with this I'm ending the slide, the presentation. You feel free to put your comments in the comment section, which point you want to discuss further. I would try to put best my effort to prepare the exclusive presentation for you and video for you. With this, thank you very much, guys. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.